content that comes from the creative application and mining of one's life experience is going to be very, very hard to replicate.
AI's impact on content, business, and strategy is disruptive. Join us as we interview industry thought leaders on how to adapt. This is the Markup AI Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Markup AI Podcast. We're very excited to have Matt Blumberg on the show today, our CEO and author of 3 books, the Startup CEO, the Startup CXO, and the Startup Boards book series, also my boss. Matt, thank you so much for joining today on our podcast.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad we're doing this series. Happy to be in your lineup.
Oh, this is exciting. We're starting a lot of thought leader interviews, and I'm really excited to talk to you about a couple of questions here to talk both personally and professionally about the impacts of AI and when you realize the importance of it. And so as we go through these, we thought no better folks to start with than people like us that work in this industry, that are living and breathing this every day. So the first question I would love to ask you is, do you have that moment that you personally realized AI was going to be that big deal? Did something happen? Was there an example that you were like, wow, this is the future?
It's an interesting question. And look, you want to point to like the launch of ChatGPT and how quickly it was adopted and the hype around it. The same way that in 1995 or 4 or whenever you want to point to the launch of Netscape as the moment that everyone knew the internet was coming. And that may be true on some level, but I would say the first time I had a use case that blew me away might be an interesting thing to key in on. So, like, yeah, I mucked around with it, and I used DALL-E, and I told it to paint me a picture of a cat sipping a martini or whatever, in the style of Chagall, and like, wow, there it was, amazing. I had chat write me a limerick for someone's birthday that was really on point, but like those are small things.
Yeah.
The first time I used it for something really material was a couple of years ago. One of my kids was applying to transfer colleges from college A to college B. And she had gotten into 3 schools to transfer and was having a really hard time making a decision. And I wrote a monster prompt into Deep Research, GPT Deep Research. And I fed in my daughter's resume, my daughter's college application personal statement from the prior year, her personal statement for the transfer application about why she wanted to transfer. And I wrote a couple paragraphs about her. And then I said where she had been and the 3 schools she was deciding between. And I just said, go. And I came back, 15 minutes later to find a well-formatted 27-page PDF table comparing not only the 3 schools, but the 3 plus the one that she was leaving against 12 key criteria that would matter to her based on the things I said about her. And I got that back and I looked at it, like all things from AI, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn good. And I looked at it and I was like, this not only saved me, I don't know, unspeakable number of hours, or saved her really, unspeakable number of hours of effort, but it's probably so much that the effort never would have happened, right? It was just an outcome that we never would have gotten to. But in a way that was almost disturbing how insightful it appeared to be, given that it's all just research and predictive technology. So for me, that was a moment of like, wow, it's not just the power of the large language model. It's the combination of the predictive technology of the transformer with RAG type, research, search, retrieval services, with the ability to materially understand things out of a prompt. That probably hit me harder than, the cat sipping a martini looking like Chagall painted it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're kind of like even, right? No, but now, did it recommend a school, or did you just ask it to provide the?
I did not ask for a recommendation. I specifically.
I'm assuming it really helped with that decision process, though.
It did. I think it helped quite a bit.
That's awesome. So that that is a huge, like, that's a monumental task to take on to see what kind of outcomes come out of that. And
Yeah.
I feel similar here. As I'm getting more into deep research and models, it's, you said before, it's something you wouldn't do. It feels like we're opening up opportunities to take action on the things that we never really would have had the chance to because of our day to day lives. Similar in point, data analysis, how much we can now analyze and find patterns in data that you still have to check, that maybe between different or disparate systems you never were able to really join together before.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, with that, that's a huge use case. I would love to ask though, there's always these valleys, right? There's this roller coaster of like, oh my Lord, it's going to change the world. Was there a point on the way down where you just realized that the hype in certain areas or certain use cases either didn't hit yet at that time or still have yet to really hit?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that has yet to hit, but it's really clear that the technology is on a trajectory where things will hit. I don't feel like I'm actually one of the people that's saying not only is it not being overhyped, but I actually think there are some things that are being understated about its possibilities. And when I look at for example, I think that the stock market has built in like some predicted level of productivity gains that society will see from this. And when you look at labor productivity in the U.S. over the last 100 years, like it goes up, it goes down, but it's in a fairly tight band. And I think it's being understated. I think the productivity impact that the world is going to see um, from AI is actually being understated. So there's a lot of areas where it hasn't lived up to the hype, but all I would say to every single one of those is probably yet.
100%. I mean, and we're seeing the jumps between, someone someone could feel that way about, if you remember when 3.5 came out from ChatGPT and then 4 came out, and that was such a huge change. And then 5 came out, and that seemed to have a dismal reaction from people. But then you also look at things where Gemini releasing from 2.5, which was a powerful model, to 3, which is already helping me in my day to day of taking documents of data and turning them into infographics, things you never would have expected to come out of these applications, is absolutely, like you said, yet. Are we there yet?
Yeah.
Now, you shared a good personal example before, but like to your day to day, how would you, or do you use AI personally in your day to day? How often do you use it? Where do you see it making its biggest impact, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, I do. I use it. I use it quite a bit. And I'll give you a couple of examples based on agents that I've built in particular. So I've written a lot, as you mentioned in your kind introduction. I've written 3 books, and I've written a lot more stuff than that. I've written a blog for over 20 years. I've written white papers and ebooks. I've hosted my own podcast twice, so there's a large body of content out there that's mine. So I've trained an agent on all of that content, which I call MattBot, and I use MattBot as regularly to help me prep for things. So prep for an interview with the media, prep for this podcast. I also use it to write things, and I never take something from it and just hand it over. I do look at it because I am me and my name is going on it, and there's no world where I say like, "Oh, my AI did it. Sorry, there was a mistake in it." But those things save me hours and hours and hours, because at this point the agent knows enough about me and my career and my writing style and things I've actually written that it does a really good job of surfacing a 95% good draft of things. And I like to think I'm very generous with my time. A college kid somewhere emails me out of the blue and wants to interview me for a class in entrepreneurship. I'm always inclined to say yes. It's really hard to do that. It's not hard to say, send me your questions in advance and I'll send you back written responses. And where I can have the bot do that in a matter of seconds. So that's one area where I'm finding it to be very helpful. Sort of, it understands me, not everything about me, but enough about me that it can do a lot of tasks like that. I'll tell you the second thing that I've been working on this year, which is a second agent, which is kind of fun, which is what I call the fantasy board.
Yeah.
And this is an idea that I got from the CEO of a company whose board I sit on. So it was not my idea, but I was happy to co-opt it with his permission. And I've basically built an agent that is a fantasy board of directors. So a lot of what CEOs do is manage a board, but also try to get good advice and feedback from a board. And I love my real board, and there's no substitute for a real board because a real board actually has a good understanding of everything that's happening at the company and the full context of the world around them, and a whole bunch of things that a bot or an agent can't do. But I've built this fantasy board which has 15 or 20 business luminaries on it. It has Steve Jobs on it. It has Warren Buffett on it. It has Clay Christensen on it. And each of those people in the agent has about a 5,000 word profile written by one of the deep research models. And not just like a generic profile of Steve Jobs, et cetera. There's lots of those, but a profile of how that person behaves as a board member, based on an enormous body of public information about how they've behaved as a board member over time. And then I have, monster prompts written so that I can ask the fantasy board for their input and feedback on things. And it's really, really interesting. Um, it's kind of weird to think of a large language model as being a thought partner, but it's effectively become a thought partner for me, because it's way easier to ask the fantasy board for their opinion and get it back in a minute than it is to ask my real board to find time on the calendar and convene, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't replace, and it should never replace a real board because it by design is missing a whole bunch of context. But for me as a CEO, it's become just a really useful sounding board on things.
Well, it sounds phenomenal academically. It's the same thing in academics. You practice with these scenarios and these examples to see how well you perform and prepare in the real world. So if you're bringing in, I'm thinking Steve Jobs. So does he have any of the explosive? I heard that at times he can be very testy and angry. Does he ever yell at you for anything?
He doesn't yell at me for anything, but I'm not sure I've provoked him in the way that some of his employees perhaps provoked him, as vividly described in Walter Isaacson's brilliant biography of him.
Well, at least you're not getting yelled at by your GPT. So one of the next questions I'd love to ask too, and like that use case is a huge, just like phenomenal idea, and that kind of leads into this next question, which is really, where do you see the biggest opportunities or business opportunities when it comes to these AI technologies? That on its own helps you prepare to become a better leader, prepare for more scenarios and outcomes. Where do you see the best opportunities coming to these businesses?
Well, it's hard to give you an answer to that because it's going to be different for every job and every company and every business. Um, you know, there certainly well, I'll answer it with a framework that one of our board members, Jake Heller, has talked about. He said there's sort of two ways to measure the impact of AI in an organization. One is ROI. What tasks is it automating, and how much money would you spend on those tasks if they weren't being automated? And there's clearly a lot of that. But he also talks about something that he calls the previously unthinkable, or maybe the previously unimaginable.
Yeah.
And that's the set of things that AI could do that you can't measure ROI because you never would have done them,
Yeah.
because it was not possible to do. And I think if any business leader or even individual contributor who's listening to this, think about things that could be automated, but also think about things that like you never thought you could do before. Um, and for every one of these opportunities, there's going to be a corresponding threat. So, can I use deep research to do something that I might have been forced to hire a management consultant to do a bunch of years ago? Yeah, probably. So that's going to give me as a business owner a lot more information, decision making, inputs, et cetera. And it might put a management consultant out of business somewhere, but it might not if I was never going to hire them to begin with. So it's a little hard to tell where there's another side of the coin and where there's not. But seeing things like the synthesis of information, using a combination of RAG search, with the writing capabilities of language models, there are clearly a bunch of opportunities with that. I think I'm not an expert in healthcare, and I'm definitely not an expert in development of pharmaceuticals. Everything I've heard and read would indicate that may be the area where humanity sees the most benefit, because technology can tackle problems that couldn't have been tackled otherwise. The personalization of cancer treatment is something that's starting. It started 5 or 10 years ago, but it's going to be really different, with some of the new capabilities coming out from AI and things that dip into AGI.
And to be honest, even things like, backing away from, medical, which is the amazing opportunities that are there to be able to test at scale and see outcomes and the personalization of treatment. But even something as simple as this podcast, if it wasn't for the tools that AI had brought to us, we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't have the bandwidth. I wouldn't be able to edit this video. But I have the tools and technology that will help me get this transcribed, get this clipped and edited into a format that's easy for me to share in about an eighth of the time that I traditionally would take putting an asset like this together. So to that point, similarly, the opportunity of being able to do the things we can't traditionally do, completely see those opportunities that you're referring to here.
Yeah.
What I'd love to ask too is, this is a bit more related to, brand narrative and technology, and dabbles a bit into our technology and the solutions that we serve. But, as we see this future of like AI generated content being created to almost deliver, like we said, these hyper personalized experiences, a lot of these are going to be generated on the fly. They're going to understand the user. They're going to understand where they're going, what they were looking at, and how to best serve the need of that person in these digital experiences. How are companies going to make sure that those experiences don't go awry, that the tone, that the way that we're talking to people, that the way that we're delivering this message resonates with those folks? How are they going to be able to do that at scale when you can't almost control the narrative like you used to?
Well, I mean, look, the obvious answer to your question is that every company in the world should be using our product at Markup AI.
Oh, of
Uh,
course.
but there's more to it than that. So, what does our product do? It helps you make sure your content stays on brand because we put guardrails around your content output from AI. End of commercial. Um, the more nuanced answer is, so yes, there's going to be a need to that. There's going to be a need to train um, AI somehow on what's your brand, what are the things you care about, what are the things you don't care about. I also think there's a world where some of those things, some of the norms that we have become used to, change over time, and it's really hard to get your arms around those, and until you see the change happening. But I was talking to a CMO recently of a Fortune 500 CMO who was saying that they have determined that the best response rates they get, or the best ratings they get from customers on responding to their inbound email customer service inquiries, are the ones where the response mirrors the question. So the response isn't about the brand being on brand. The response is about the brand sounding like the asker of the question. So you get a question from, a millennial that uses a certain language, tone, style, etc. You answer it like that. So I mean, it's a little bit like a sales technique or an interview technique called mirroring, right? So if you're on a sales call and you're a sales rep, and the person leans back in their chair, you lean back in your chair. If they cross their arms, you cross their arms. If they're speaking softly, you speak softly. So that's not about you being on brand. That's about you trying to get the best response by mirroring someone else's brand. So I give that example only to say, if the whole world decides to go in that direction, the way people think about brands may be different going forward.
And it's very interesting. It reminds me, I can't think of the book now, but there's an author, former hostage negotiation author, that actually wrote a book about, that was one of the stages of mirroring, which is part of the negotiation. The book is
Yeah.
escaping my mind at the moment.
Yes, I read the book as well. It is also escaping my mind. We'll see if it gets to either one of us, or I can find it in my
Yeah,
shelf here.
yeah, it was ne- ne- never leave more than half. Was it something like that?
Maybe
It's like
something like that. Yeah.
something. I'll see if I can find. I'll probably put a tooltip up after we record this. But so absolutely. So one thing is, of course, mirroring, giving people the response, the feeling that they're talking to someone like themselves, giving them that best personalized response. What happens? And this is kind of leading into our next question here. What happens when the person on the other side of that screen isn't a person? So, what happens when more and more agents, like OpenAI's browser Atlas, these agents that take action, that instead of me going to Google Flights and searching for the right flight, Google knows, or my agent knows, that I like to fly with a certain brand in a certain type of seat at a certain type of day, and the human no longer engages with that experience. How do you see businesses adapting to that digital world when it's AI that is actually using these interfaces for these businesses?
Yeah, it's like, great, you have your agent call my agent, we'll do lunch.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much.
um, I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's certainly going to lead to some new paradigms in user experience and in things that separate the routine and knowable from the spontaneous and unknowable. Um, if you think about travel as a great example, um, so sure, if I have a hard target search and I'm going to Boston tomorrow and I need to get there by 5 o'clock and I want to do it as cheaply as possible, but I would really rather fly on American than Delta, and the agent knows that, it'll just do its thing. That's really different from the discovery of, where do I want to take my next vacation?
True.
So, I think the world of user experience will start to figure out how to use technology to differentiate between the routine and the knowable, versus something that's more spontaneous and requires more humanity. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. I don't know how businesses will adapt to that, and it may require that people do some of the adaptation. Um, I think the world where everything is always done by agents all of the time, that's a pretty sad world. I don't see the world going that way. I think there will be points of differentiation by understanding where humanity and creativity and spontaneity are important.
Do you think then that we'll have to support this kind of dual experience agency where people have to continually support this idea of having web experiences that are optimized both for humans and for agents that may use
Probably. Yeah,
their tools? Reminds me of
probably.
makes me think of it's like I don't remember in the '90s whenever you'd call a main line and you'd call a business and they'd say,
If you want to speak
for
to a
this.
human, press one, right?
Well, it was more like if you want this, press one. If you want this, press two. If you don't have a touch tone phone, hang on the line and someone will get to you shortly. Because,
Yeah,
but it's one of those like, will we have that experience where it's going to be, I go to a site and it's, oh, geez, I have to be a bot to really use this? Or do I have to wait for some other human engagement to pop up? And how long will that experience take? Uh,
yeah,
but that's,
yeah.
and so, oh, sorry. If you
No,
had
I mean, I was
anything
gonna
you
say,
want to
like,
add to that.
think about your frustration today when you're stuck in a customer service phone tree,
Oh, it's
or
exhausting.
you're chatting with a chatbot that's useless because they don't have the answer. It serves up five answers. Are any of these helpful? No. Here are five more. Are these helpful? No, they're getting less helpful, not more helpful. I can't remember who told me this recently, but there was some CEO or CMO that I was talking to who was speaking to, speaking to an audience and said, how many of you would pay extra for customer service that was a live human in your country, in your native language, answering your phone call? And like 80% of the hands shoot up. So that's the beginning of it, right? The beginning of it is, it may start with choice. Okay, do you want to have the premium human solution or the automated bot solution? This one's more expensive, but you get what you get. Um, and ultimately, that choice may be augmented by a smart router that knows when you want that choice and knows when you don't want that choice.
Hey, depending on the need, I would absolutely choose direct human access to talk to someone live. If I'm on like tech support with a computer issue, 100%. Um,
Yeah.
and that kind of brings us into as we're talking about these hybrid or commingled uh, agentic and human experiences. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. What is something about either content creation brand management, or even anything related to AI technologies that where they're influencing more and more into our workloads, what do you think is something that they will never be able to replicate or replace?
Well, never is a really long time. Um,
True. That is
and
a valid point.
it implies, for example, that Neuralink won't come up with the way of downloading the entire contents of my brain and life experience or whatever, right? But if I think about things that are going to be hardest to do, least likely to do, um, you know, uh, the content that comes from the creative application and mining of one's life experience is going to be very, very hard to replicate. Um, I can use my MattBot agent to give me an answer to a question, and it'll be, 9 times out of 10, it'll be right. Maybe 95 times out of 100, it'll be okay, good enough, etc. But 50 times out of 100, it didn't know about something that it could have used instead. That would have been better. So, the full contents of one's life experience, combined with the power of the synapses in your head and when they fire and when they make connections and when they don't, um, is going to be hard to replicate.
What do they say? Often duplicated, never mimicked. What's the word? There's a phrase around that. Often imitated, never
Never
duplicated, I think.
duplicated, maybe
That's
something
what
like
it
that.
is.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's a little hard to. It's a little hard to say, but there's something about humanity that's just different from machines, no matter how good machines are. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know that a bot is ever going to be empathetic.
True.
Uh,
Even though they may act that way,
they may act that
here's
way, but you're a human. You can tell if another human's actually being empathetic toward you, or if they're faking it. And it doesn't really make you feel good when they're faking it.
true.
So maybe the bot makes you feel a little bit better for a few minutes, but
The long-term effects don't really work out there.
yeah,
Matt, I have one last question I'd love to ask you before
yeah.
we call it a day here. And it is, what are the biggest challenges or mistakes that businesses will make or face when they are trying to deploy AI technologies into their workforces or
Hmm.
into their processes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think if I think about the last 30 years of technology, at least, you could probably go back further than that. Um, there's this really interesting cycle that I've observed inside of companies, which is, the business owners own something until a disruptive technology comes along. And then all of a sudden, the IT team takes ownership for a while, um, until it becomes so routine, matter of fact, et cetera, that it sort of ownership reverts back to the business owner. So, I'll give you here's example number one: the internet. So, before the internet, the way marketers worked was they made brochures and they made ads and they right, et cetera. All of a sudden, the internet comes along. Now everyone has a website, but now it's not just the marketing department that is involved in the website. All of a sudden, IT is all over the website, and it's there. And IT says, "No, we own the website because it's technical. So we're going to build it, and we're going to select the platform, and we're going to set the workflows up, etc." Um, and so there's this sort of ebb and flow of responsibility or power. I don't know the right word. Probably depends on the organization you're talking about. Where all of a sudden, like IT is in charge of something, and until that thing becomes routine, and until the technology becomes so easy to use that the end user can be in charge of it themselves, um, you have this weird, sort of detour. And some IT teams are better than others. Some of them deeply understand business process and business impact, uh, and some of them don't. And some of them don't care about it. Some of them care about technology for technology's sake, and some of them only care about user experience and user impact. And so you saw that with the internet, that all of a sudden, like the website became the property of like the nerds, and like marketing was sort of at best co-equal, but maybe a little bit more even left off to the side. And that happened with email, and it happened with social, and it happened with mobile, and now it's happening with AI as well. So I think the biggest challenge that companies are going to have to deal with as they get their arms around this new technology is the same challenge they've had anytime they get their arms around any new technology, which is how to make sure that the people who are using the technology to drive the business forward are actually the ones in the driver's seat, not only the IT team. Because for every IT leader who gets it and who is deeply empathetic to end users and to customer experience, and who doesn't care about building building their own organization and building their own power in the organization, for every one of those, there's another one that's the opposite. So companies have to be very wary of that in the next 5 years as this technology is maturing.
And I'm figuring that's very different based on the industry you're in and how much regulatory requirements you have to adhere to and all that.
Depending on the company. It's depending on the company. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't take as long as adoption levels did for both the internet and for phones. But granted, just think about all of the application software, DRM management, and all these applications that have been built just to make sure, or just to make it possible for all of these things like the internet and mobile phones and so forth, the website, to be owned by the people that need to be owning it, which has been very interesting. So, Matt, I can't thank you enough. This has been awesome to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on and answering these questions with me today.
Sounds good. Good to talk to you, Chris.
And everyone else out there, thank you for watching. We really appreciate you watching this episode. Again, this is the Markup AI podcast. We would appreciate a subscribe and a like on the video. And if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with Matt or myself, comment them below and we'll answer you directly. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. AI's impact on content, business, and strategy is disruptive. Join us as we interview industry thought leaders on how to adapt. This is the Markup AI podcast.